Hey guys, welcome back to Business Law Lectures. Hope everybody's doing good. Um, I miss you guys, I have to say. As much of a pain in the rear end it was sometimes to teach at 8 o'clock in the morning, I do miss seeing you guys 3 days a week. Again, I hope everybody's doing all right, hanging in there, doing what you're supposed to be doing. So, with this lecture, we're going to talk about contractual remedies. And when I say remedy, what I mean is if you are a party to a contract and the other side, the other party to the contract, breaches that contract, what can you get? What can you do in a lawsuit for breach of contract? And we call that a remedy. What will your remedy be? And the idea behind a remedy in a breach of contract case is to try and compensate the non-breaching party, in other words, the party that lived up to their end of the bargain, lived up to their end of the contract, to try and place them in a position as close to where they would have been had the contract been fulfilled or had not been breached. Now, contractual remedies can get a little bit complicated, so this is kind of going to be a somewhat simple overview of what the options are when you sue for breach of contract. And again, it's to try and compensate the non-breaching party for the loss of the bargain, for losing what they would have gotten had the contract been fully performed. So the first remedy, and the most common, is something called compensatory damages. Compensate the non-breaching party for the loss of the bargain. And it's pretty simple, but there's a couple little kinks that we'll talk about. So let's say I had a contract. I own a hotel and I'm getting new televisions for the hotel. And I'm going to keep the math as simple and basic as I possibly can, just to illustrate the point. Plus, I'm no good at math. That's why I went to law school. So I own a hotel and I have 100 rooms and I want to replace all the televisions in that room. So I enter into a contract with a outfit that sells televisions, and I'm going to buy, the contract is I will buy 100 televisions for $1 each for a total of $100. So just to go back a little bit, my consideration is paying the $100 and the other side is delivering the televisions. So 100 televisions for $1 each, $100 total. On the day that the televisions are to be delivered, the party that's providing the televisions breaches the contract and doesn't deliver the televisions. So I am forced, as a result, to find another supplier of televisions. But this time around, I'm paying $2 for each television for a total of $200. I sue the party I originally contracted with who failed to deliver the televisions, and I sue them for compensatory damages. Now, what are my damages here? Well, I had to go out and I had to purchase 100 televisions someplace else, and I paid $1 more for each television. So my compensatory damages, and again, this is somewhat of an oversimplification, my compensatory damages will be the difference between the price that I had originally contracted for, $100 or $1 per television, and the amount that I had to pay as a result of the breach, which was $200 or $2 per television. So my damages on the loss of that bargain will be $100. Now, you might be able to throw in a few other things if you had some added costs in securing those televisions someplace else. If the delay in getting, presuming there is a delay in getting the televisions, that might be the source of some more damages. But the basic loss of the bargain cost me, as the hotel owner, $100 because I had to go out and get the televisions someplace else. That's the basic gist of compensatory damages, okay? Now, let me digress for just a minute and say that the non-breaching party, the party that's lived up to their end of the contract, has a duty to do what's called mitigate their damages. In other words, they can't just sit on their hands and let their damages pile up and hope to attribute it to the breaching party. Again, the non-breaching party has a duty to mitigate damages. So what would be an example of that? An example of that would be going out and getting the televisions someplace else. You can't just sit back and say, well, I had to close my hotel or I had to lower rates because they didn't deliver the televisions. In order to mitigate my damages, I've got to go out and look for those televisions someplace else. I can't just kick back and say, well, I couldn't open my hotel, and so you owe me for all the lost revenue. That's not how it works. I've got to mitigate my damages. I've got to go out and get those televisions someplace else. Another example of mitigation of damages is, let's say that you have, and this will also demonstrate compensatory damages. Let's say that you I am a landlord and I rent you an apartment. It's a 12-month lease and you're to pay $100 a month. So it would be $1,200 for the whole year. You pay once a month, $100. 6 months into the lease, you move out. The tenant moves out, breaches the lease agreement, and moves out 6 months early. You've paid me $600 for the first 6 months, but now I'm out the last $600 for the remaining 6 months on that lease. Now, my compensatory damages would be the $600 in lost rental income for the 6 months that you moved out in violation of the lease agreement. But the landlord, as the non-breaching party, has a duty to mitigate their damages. So I have a duty to mitigate my damages. Now, how do I mitigate my damages in this example? Well, I've got to try and lease that apartment to someone else. If I immediately find someone to move in and lose no rent whatsoever, then I don't have any damages, okay? But let's presume that it takes me 2 months to find somebody else to rent that apartment. And I have some expenses involved in advertising the apartment and various other things that it took to find somebody else to move in. So under this example, I would have 2 months with nobody living there at $200 that could be attributed to the breaching party, the lessee, the tenant that moved out. But the remaining 4 months, since I've got somebody else to pay and to move in, that remaining $400 would not be part of my damages. Again, because I have a duty to mitigate, to try and find somebody else to move into that apartment. I can't just sit on my hands and charge you the full $600 that was due under the lease. Now, if I make a good faith effort to find somebody else to move into that apartment, but I can't for whatever reason, then the damages will be the full $600. But in order to collect that full $600, I've got to show that I made a good faith effort to move someone else into that apartment. Okay, so that's the duty to mitigate damages. Let me give you one more example. Let's say I'm a full-time college professor and I have an employment contract with Davison Elkins College. It's a 5-year employment contract. And let's just say it pays me $50,000 a year. And there's only specific reasons under that employment contract that I can be fired. Let's assume that after 4 years, the college fires me without cause under the contract, and I sue them for breach of contract. Obviously, my compensatory damages would be the 1 year of the contract that I wasn't paid for, because remember, I was fired after 4 years, the college being in breach. So my simple measure of compensatory damages would be a $50,000 in lost salary that I didn't make that I was supposed to under the contract with the college. So there's a good example, again, of compensatory damages. Again, I have a duty to mitigate those damages. So that means I need to go out and try and find another job. Let's say I find another job at West Virginia Wesleyan College, but it only pays me $30,000 a year. At that point, my compensatory damages will be the difference between the contract price I negotiated with the college of $50,000 and the $30,000 I'm getting from Wesleyan. So my compensatory damages under that example, because I've mitigated by finding another job, would be $20,000. Okay, again, the difference between the $50,000 from D&E and the $30,000 I'm being paid under my new job. Now, again, these are oversimplifications. I just want you guys to get a basic idea of compensatory damages in a breach of contract case and the duty to mitigate damages. Okay, so compensatory damages, mitigation of damages. There is another remedy in a breach of contract case, but it is rare, and it is only in those circumstances where it's impossible to go out and find another deal. So it's impossible to go out and find television someplace else, or it's impossible to find another job. And in those situations, you can ask the court for a remedy of what's called specific performance. And under specific performance, this allows the non-breaching party to request that a court order the breaching party to perform, order the breaching party to do whatever they were supposed to do under the contract. Now, again, that's a very rare situation, and it only involves situations where you have a unique, one-of-a-kind item that you can't go out and get anywhere else. So, let's say I have a contract to purchase a rare, obviously one-of-a-kind painting. I don't know anything about art, but let's say I have a contract to purchase the Mona Lisa. And I'm going to spend $100 million to purchase the Mona Lisa. Signed, perfectly valid contract with all of the four elements of a valid contract: agreement, consideration, capacity, and legality. No problem with capacity. We've got everything we need for a valid contract. No question about it. But at the last minute, the seller of the Mona Lisa says, no, I'm not selling it, and breaches the contract. Now, I can't go out and purchase the Mona Lisa anywhere else. There's only one of them. So I can't go out and purchase it anywhere else. That would be a situation where you could ask a court for specific performance. In other words, force the seller to deliver the Mona Lisa at the agreed upon price, for the contractual price. So a one-of-a-kind piece of artwork obviously would be a good example of when specific performance would be an appropriate remedy to request. Eric Clapton's Fender Stratocaster guitar that he played at the Royal Albert Hall on December 3rd, 1969, or something like that. Unique, one-of-a-kind items. Now, real estate is pretty much a unique, one-of-a-kind item. I'm sure we could dream up a scenario where you have two lots that are exactly the same size, exactly the same condition. When I say lots, I mean a specific piece of real estate, and that there's very little difference between the two. Perhaps in that situation, a court would be reluctant to order specific performance if another almost identical piece of property were readily available. But as a general rule, real estate is a unique, one-of-a-kind item. No two pieces of real estate are exactly the same simply by virtue of the fact that they aren't located in the same exact place. They could be right next to each other. And again, that might be an example of maybe a court would say, well, you could get the lot next door. But as a general rule, they're not making any more real estate. So it is a unique, one-of-a-kind item, and it is an area where you see courts consider the contractual remedy of specific performance. Now, you might be asking yourself, why don't courts order specific performance in a wider array of breach of contract cases? So back to my television example. Well, why not just order the company that was supposed to deliver the televisions to hand over the televisions or fulfill the order. But I think if you think about the implications of that for a little bit, you'll quickly realize why that's not such a great option. The television company entered into the contract because they thought they would be able to deliver the televisions, and they thought that that deal would be beneficial to them. That's why they entered the contract in the first place. If something has happened and they're unable to do that, it's doubtful that a court ordering them to do it would be successful, number one. And number two, if you're the non-breaching party, if you're me, the hotel owner, do you really want to force these folks to deliver you 100 TVs when they've been unable to do it based under the original contract? Are you going to be worried about the quality of the televisions? Are you going to be worried about their true desire to deliver the televisions? Are you going to be worried about whether they're making any money off this deal? Because if they're not making any money off this deal, they're going to do everything they can to try and limit their exposure, which probably isn't going to be good for you. Let's say you have a contract with a doctor to replace your knee, and you've done your research, and this guy or gal has replaced thousands of knees and has the best rate of success of any other doctor around. And at the last minute, they say, well, we're going to have this other doctor perform the surgery. And you're like, no way. And you sue. And the doctor example is not a great example because there's some contractual issues there. But let's just assume for the purpose of this example, it's the case. It's a good way to illustrate it. You're like, no, I don't want this new doctor. I want the old doctor. Now, if the old doctor doesn't want to do the knee surgery, has indicated that he or she doesn't want to do it, do you really want to force them to do that at this point? Do you think that you're likely to have a good outcome? Are you going to be more concerned about your outcome when you're forcing somebody through the court system? And the way the courts enforce their orders is through contempt. So in other words, if you don't do what a court orders you to do, you can be fined or even jailed for contempt of court. I think that's a good illustration of a situation where once somebody's indicated that they don't want to live up to the bargain or they can't live up to the bargain, you probably don't want a court to try and enforce them to do that. Your better option is compensatory damages and to get money to compensate you for that loss of the bargain. Again, the doctor example, it's not a good example as far as an actual contract and everything, but it does illustrate why one of the reasons why specific performance is generally not available as an option for a remedy in breach of contracts. Again, specific performance only for, excuse me, only for unique one-of-a-kind items. You'll definitely see a specific performance question in your next assignment or on the test eventually. I haven't decided exactly when we're going to have a test. We're going to finish up contracts pretty soon. I normally do a test that encompasses both contracts and business organization, which will be our next unit. But I think I'm going to try and make it a little bit easier on you guys and have a smaller test with just questions concerning contracts. And the assignments, the two assignments that I've given you thus far, and one or two more assignments will probably be exactly what I take those test questions from. I don't want to surprise you with any material. I want to make sure that you have ample opportunity to be prepared for the tests. Okay, so that gets us through compensatory damages, specific performance, remedies in a breach of contract case. We're not quite at 30 minutes yet, but I'm going to go ahead and cut this one short. Make sure you guys comment on the video to let me know that you have seen it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, my YouTube channel yet, I'd ask that you go ahead and do that because it just makes it easier on me to keep track of you guys. Hope everybody's doing good As I said earlier, I'm coming to you live from my garage again. My family's doing well. We're taking all the precautions that we're supposed to be taking. Hopefully you guys are taking all that seriously as well, and you're finding good ways to occupy your time. If anybody needs anything or has any questions, or just wants to talk or whatever, please feel free to call me, give me a shout. I'd be happy to hear from you guys. All right, we'll see you again in another couple days. Remember that your assignment is due Monday by 5. I've gotten a few back already. Try and get those in on time if you possibly can. If you're having a problem or there's something that's going to keep you from doing that, just shoot me an email and I'll work with you. I'm trying to be as absolutely flexible as I possibly can. So somewhat of a brief lecture today, but it's important stuff. And I really hope you guys are getting something out of these videos. The study of contracts is something that you will use for the rest of your lives. That knowledge is powerful and it's important. You're certainly not going to be experts, but just to have the basic ideas of what a contract really is and some of the intricacies are things that even if you don't end up going into business, you're going to enter into contracts all the time. You already are. So it is some pretty good knowledge for you guys to have. Has some practical application in the real world. All right, I hope to hear from you guys. Take care, and we'll see you in a couple days. Thanks.